Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? We're tackling a big one today. What happens if Elon Musk actually takes charge of a new Department of Government Efficiency?
DOGE.
Yep, DOGE. In a potential second Trump administration, could he really make the U.S. government more efficient?
And what would that even look like?
Exactly. The good, the bad, and maybe even the ugly.
Well, you've sent us some fascinating sources.
Including parts of an article that really caught my eye. This is going to be a wild one.
You know what I think is interesting here? This isn't just about Musk, is it?
It's not.
This is about a whole country grappling with a debt crisis. It's starting to feel very, very real. We're not talking about some problem for our grandkids to deal with.
Right. This is happening right now.
Right now. Think about it. For the first time ever, we're spending more on interest payments for our national debt than we are on defense.
Wow.
That's a huge red flag, wouldn't you say?
It's definitely giving me some serious financial anxiety. And we're talking massive numbers here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just in 2024 alone, the deficit is projected to hit almost $2 trillion.
It's crazy.
And get this, the total national debt, $36 trillion. It's enough to make your head spin. So how did we even get here?
Well, the simplest answer. The U.S. government's been spending more than it's taking in for years. And when your expenses are higher than your income,
You had to borrow.
you got it to make up the difference. But let's unpack that a bit.
Okay.
Where does the government's money come from? Big chunk, about 49%. Personal income taxes.
Yeah.
And another 35%. That's Social Security taxes.
Got it.
Now, here's the thing. A huge portion of that money goes right back out the door to fund those same programs. 22% to Social Security and a whopping 30% to healthcare.
So most of that money goes right back out.
It does. Then add another 13% for defense spending, plus all sorts of other expenses.
And suddenly we're in the red.
It's not surprising, is it?
No, not really. So basically we have this picture of a government living beyond its means, racking up debt like crazy.
That's one way to put it.
And that's where Elon Musk enters the scene with his plan for the Department of Government Efficiency.
Or DOGE.
Yeah, DOGE.
Right.
You have to admit, the name is pretty Muskian.
It is.
But what's he actually proposing?
Well, his mandate is essentially threefold. Reduce government waste / unnecessary regulations.
The ones that are stifling growth.
Exactly. And bring some fiscal responsibility back. Getting government spending aligned with actual revenue.
Sounds ambitious.
It's a tall order for sure. But it's interesting
What is?
how Musk's vision for DOGE is kind of similar to what Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, is doing.
Oh, yeah. He's taking a pretty hardcore approach to cutting government spending, isn't he?
He is.
I'm curious to see how that plays out. But back to Musk.
Okay.
He has this reputation as a disruptor, right?
Right.
This almost mythical ability to make things more efficient. I mean, look at what he's done. Tesla with their production processes. SpaceX with reusable rockets. It makes you wonder, could he bring that same magic to the U.S. government?
Well, that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's easy to look at Musk's track record and think, he turned around Tesla and SpaceX. He can fix the government. But it's crucial to remember, governing is a whole different beast.
Than running a company.
Absolutely. We're not talking about optimizing production lines or rocket launches here. We're talking about people's lives, essential services, this whole web of interconnected systems.
So it's more complicated than just cutting costs.
Much more. You can't just focus on efficiency without considering the potential consequences.
That makes sense. So even if Musk is a genius at building rockets and electric cars.
There's no guarantee that'll translate to governing.
Okay, fair point. Let's try to be optimistic for a moment. Let's say Musk manages to pull this off. What's the best case scenario here?
Best case scenario.
Yeah.
What would a truly efficient U.S. government look like?
Well, imagine the U.S. with way less debt, maybe even a budget surplus, for the first time in decades.
Think what we could do if those resources were suddenly freed up. Invest in education, improve infrastructure, maybe put more money into research and development.
Okay, now you're talking. Better schools, smoother roads, more cutting-edge research. I like where this is going. Wouldn't all of that lead to more jobs too? More opportunities for everyone? I'm starting to see the appeal of this whole efficiency thing.
Yeah.
But wait, didn't you say something earlier about job losses being a potential downside?
I did. That's one of the trickier aspects of this.
Yeah.
It is. It's not just about numbers, though, is it?
It's mine.
These are real people we're talking about,
Yeah.
with families and mortgages and dreams. You have to think about the impact.
Right, impact of what?
A sudden job loss. How would that affect their lives? Would those private sector jobs, the ones they're promising,
Right.
would they appear fast enough to prevent hardship for people? It's a real gamble.
With high stakes.
Definitely high stakes.
Okay, so even in the best case scenario, even if Musk's efficiency drive actually works.
There could be downsides.
Yeah. Painful side effects. And actually, we haven't even talked about the potential downsides yet, have we? What could go wrong here?
Well, let's start with conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
Think about it. This is the guy who owns Tesla, SpaceX, and X.
Right.
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 All companies that do a lot of business with the government. So how can we be sure that he'll keep his personal business interests separate from DOGE?
That's a good question.
Is it possible that policies end up benefiting his companies instead of, the public good?
That's a tough question. And I bet a lot of people are going to be asking that.
I think so too. It's like, imagine the star player on a team
Yeah.
also being the referee.
Right. How can we expect impartiality when the decisions could directly impact his own bottom line?
It's tough, isn't it? And it's not even just about his companies directly. Think about all his investments, right?
And other tech ventures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if those companies stand to gain from government contracts or from deregulation? The potential for favoritism, even if it's unintentional.
Is a real concern.
It is.
So we've got potential conflicts of interest. But even if those magically disappear, wouldn't there be pushback
Pushback.
against these reforms from, well, regular people?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, so many Americans depend on government programs, don't they? And regulations for healthcare, Social Security, consumer protection.
They do.
Would people really be okay with seeing those things cut or scaled back?
It's a good point. I think it's easy to get lost in the ideas, right? Efficiency, smaller government. But we can't forget about real people.
Yeah.
We're talking about social safety nets, environmental protections,
Yeah.
the regulations that ensure, fair labor practices and safe
That's
products.
some important stuff.
Yeah. Musk might say those are sacrifices we have to make for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
But not everyone's going to agree with that.
They're not.
Not at all. I think we could see a lot of things happening, protests, legal challenges, maybe even political gridlock. So bad that nothing gets done.
Oh, wow. And we can't forget about disruption, right?
Disrupt.
Even if it all works out in the end, wouldn't there be bumps along the way? I mean, just downsizing the government would cause chaos.
Oh, yeah. You'd have job losses, possible disruptions to important services, departments getting reorganized, a lot of uncertainty for people depending on those programs.
Like, what kinds of disruptions are we talking about?
Imagine longer wait times, for example, for Social Security benefits, or delays in visa processing, funding cuts for research. The list goes on.
So many things could go wrong.
It's like trying to do open heart surgery
Uh-oh.
while the patient is running a marathon.
Yeah. Okay, I get it. So we're dealing with a complicated situation here. On one hand, there's this potential, right, for a more efficient government,
Right?
maybe one that's more fiscally responsible, that could free up resources for things like education and infrastructure.
It's possible.
But then on the other hand, conflicts of interest, possible pushback from the public, and this risk of disruptions. All sorts of essential services. That's a lot to think about.
There is. It's not a simple situation,
Yeah.
black and white.
It's-
No. I think we have to go beyond the numbers here. Start thinking about values.
Values.
As a society, like, what are our priorities? Is efficiency the most important thing, even if it means sacrificing fairness? Or social safety nets? Do we want a stable transition for people who might be negatively impacted?
Or do we just go for it, full speed ahead on the efficiency train?
Exactly. Are we willing to accept those downsides, the disruptions, to get this streamlined, cost-effective government?
You're making me think about that Argentina example again.
Yeah.
Miley's approach. Did it actually work? Are people better off? Or are there hidden costs that we're not seeing?
It's still early. Tough to say for sure. And every country is different, right?
They are.
Different context.
Yeah.
Political, economic. What works in Argentina might not work here.
True.
But it's a good reminder about the trade-offs
Yeah.
between efficiency and, social welfare.
It's a reminder that governing is complicated, isn't it?
It is.
And speaking of complicated, we've talked about the challenges of Musk's vision. But have we talked about the scale of this?
The scale.
Of the task. I mean, the U.S. government is huge. It's not like we can just flip a switch and everything runs perfectly.
You're absolutely right. Even if Musk had the best intentions, the most brilliant plan, putting it into action across a bureaucracy as big and entrenched as ours.
It'd be tough.
Incredibly tough. It wouldn't just take technical expertise. It would take understanding the political landscape, The art of negotiation and compromise, building consensus, getting buy-in from so many different people.
Wow, it feels like we've only just dipped our toes into this whole DOGE thing.
Right?
And it's already clear there are so many layers,
Definitely.
so many potential twists and turns. It's a lot, even for a deep dive. But I think it's time to bring it all home.
Okay.
What are the big takeaways here? The things people need to remember as this whole thing unfolds?
I think the first one, the most important one, we're facing a real debt crisis in the U.S.
Mhm.
This is something we can't just ignore.
This isn't just some theoretical thing.
It's not. It has the potential to affect every aspect of our lives.
Right.
Think about it. Our taxes, the services we rely on. It's big.
And it's not some far-off threat either. I mean, we can see it right now with interest rates and inflation.
Absolutely.
And into all of this steps Elon Musk, the disruptor, right? With his big, untested plan to change the system.
And that's the second key takeaway. This whole thing, it's an experiment, a huge gamble. There's a chance for positive change, of course.
There is.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe Musk can find ways to make the government more efficient, more fiscally responsible. But we have to be real about the risks, too.
Right.
We talked about those, right? The conflicts of interest, the
Yeah.
chance of pushback from the public, the possibility of things going wrong, unintended consequences that could have ripple effects for years.
So it's not as simple as Musk is good or Musk is bad,
Not at all. There are no easy answers here.
and no guarantees. What we have is a complicated situation. Messy, really. It needs careful consideration.
It does. And that leads to the third takeaway, maybe the most important of all.
What's that?
We need to be engaged citizens, informed. We can't just sit back and watch. We have to ask the tough questions, demand transparency from our leaders, and hold them accountable for their choices.
Because this is important.
It is. The decisions made now will affect all of us for a long time to come.
Okay, so we've got this debt crisis hanging over us. We've got Elon Musk at the head of this new powerful department, and we've got tons of uncertainty about what happens next. It's a lot to take in. But before we go,
Yeah.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought, something to really think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
We've spent a lot of time talking about economics, the numbers, the policies, all the possible costs and benefits. But what about the human side of all of this?
The human side.
Yeah, the individual stories, the hopes and fears of the people who are going to be most affected. What will it mean for, say, a single mom working 2 jobs? Or an elderly couple relying on Social Security?
Those are good questions.
Or even an entrepreneur trying to start a business?
It's easy to forget about them, isn't it?
It is when we're talking about these big, abstract ideas. But at the end of the day, whether this succeeds or fails, it'll be measured by how it affects people's lives. Exactly. So as we watch this unfold, I want to encourage everyone, don't just read the headlines. Look beyond the numbers, find those human stories, listen to those voices, the people who are being affected by this, for good or bad, because those are the stories that will give you the real picture. And who knows, maybe they'll inspire you to get involved. Make your own voice heard in this debate about the future of our country. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.